To this fantastic video that we're making today. Today, we're doing another tier list because I hate myself and I want to get lots of people to give me their differing opinions on the internet, which is totally a great way to deal with your mental health. But if you like the last tier video, you'll hopefully like this one. Today, we're going to be covering the hero paths. So, as you can see here, I've got a bit of a not a normal setup here. I've had to create my own tier list maker because tier list maker will not work for these images. I don't know why. It keeps cutting them off. If you know how to make it work, let me know in the comments how to make the images show up all the way and not just cut them really bad. But hey, that is just the way that it is. So we're going to go through every single one of the different hero paths. I'm going to rate them from S tier, meaning that they're like God tier. This is the one that you should probably always pick on this hero, to literally nobody uses this. I've never seen anybody use this one. It's bad. It's not good. And if you have differing opinions, please let me know in the comments. I'm sure a lot of you will. If you like this kind of content and you want to check out more stuff like this, do consider subscribing to the channel. It takes one little click. Just go down there. Do it right now. Just click. Just clickety. It's done. It's done. It's over. Right? We're not going to talk about it again till the end of the video. So let's get into it. We're going to start off with the Plague Doctor here. So, oh god. So she's got three. All heroes have three paths. So if you don't know what the hero paths are, they're basically a set of changes, basically modifiers that you can pick at the beginning when you select a hero that will stay with that hero for the duration of that run, or the next run if they're a memoried hero, but that's a whole different thing. So basically they're made to force you to kind of play different play styles, and try different things. But some of them do a really good job of that. Some of them do a kind of crap job of that. So we'll see how it is. Excuse all the ads. I'm using the fan wiki here, which is just terrible for ads. So we're going to start off with the Plague Doctors. Her first one is Alchemist. So Alchemist lowers her health. It increases her blight chance. It doesn't increase how much blight she gives, but it does give her a higher chance to deal blight. And also blight causing skills, so like noxious, hand grenade or plague grenade and noxious blast. I'm mixing those up. Those have a 10% higher crit chance base. And then it increases pretty much all of her resistances. Besides her death's door check or her DVR, it increases the rest of them. So I'm going to say that this one is pretty easily a S-class, maybe not S-class, but it's definitely like A. It is really good. It works with pretty much all. It doesn't really do anything negative besides the health downside. She's already a pretty squishy character, so it's definitely it can be a little bit of a problem if you don't have a way to deal with that damage. But hey, she doesn't get any effect to her healing that's negative, so that's really good. She can still heal really effectively. She can deal so much more blight damage because it lands so much more often, and the additional crit chance is really powerful because that gives you a 20% additional chance to land the blight, plus the 33% chance that she's already given by Alchemist. It is a really, really good one. Yeah, I'm torn between S and A. There's a couple that I really know are S ranks. I think this is an A rank. It's really, really, really good, but it's not like I'm not going to take it every single time, all the time, always. She has another really good path, which we're going to get into next, which is Surgeon. So this is her second path. This one actually increases her health, makes her a bit tankier, and it increases her melee skill damage, which is only one ability, Incision. So Incision is an ability that I think a lot of people sleep on. They're like, it's kind of just like her secondary ability, like your user for blight and healing and some support. You're not really supposed to use her for melee damage, but that's the whole point. That's why this is really good. That plus 50% damage is really powerful. Combined with the fact it's actually a pretty damn decent bleed. She can end up doing some crazy damage. If you get a damage dealing trinket on her, especially if you get her anatomical textbook and you actually get the medicinal herbs and she's dealing even more crit from melee skills, you're doing really well there. On top of that, you get the addition to her healing skills. So that works for Indiscriminate Science and for Battlefield Medicine. It gives her an additional 33% healing, which, I mean, depending on the hero, that's huge. If you've got a really tanky hero, that's a lot of health. That's multiple hits worth of health, especially for something like Indiscriminate Science, which scales crazy with lots of trinkets. So if you got somebody who's generating a lot of trinkets, like a Mana Arms, or even a Leper who's generating blind tokens or trinkets, tokens, not trinkets, then you're doing really well there. So definitely a really, really good one. I don't think it's as good as Alchemist, but I think it's definitely got its place. I think it's definitely a B tier one. It's not bad. You should definitely like have some fun playing with it and like enjoy it, but I don't think it's the best of hers, right? And so the next one we're going to talk about is, I keep alt-tabbing really badly here, is going to be Physician. This is what I would consider. Oh, there's also a minus to her blight chance on Surgeon, so she doesn't deal blight as effectively. It doesn't lower how much blight she deals, just lowers the chance that she will deal it. So do keep that in mind. You kind of lose out on some of her primary damage dealing. So Physician actually lowers how much blight and bleed she does. So basically the point of this one is to remove her as a damage dealer, right? This is to be a support only role. So I understand the reasoning behind it, right? What else it does is it gives disorienting blast skills a plus 20% chance to stun or daze, right? Also gives ounce of prevention skills a plus 15% stress resist. And Emboldening Vapors gets an extra strength token. This is a little bit confusing because people are like, it already gives a strength token. Now it gives 2 times strength tokens. And Disorienting Blast actually gives vulnerable. Now, honestly, when I first played with this one, I didn't really like it that much. I thought it was like, it's so, I don't know, it feels very situational. And that you have to, but it's like, oh, this does so many things to so many different things. But that makes it really powerful. It basically makes her whole utility kit a lot stronger, especially if you're working it right. If you're using something like Emboldening Vapors and combining it with Disorienting Blast, and you have something like a Sharp Shot Highwayman, you can deal so much damage with something like that. Tacking that on with the crit tokens, plus the 15% base stress resist that also comes about, makes Ounce of Prevention like actually decent. Like 15% is not it's not that small. It sounds small, but when you're talking about stress, which is something that's so constant in the game, it's always happening. 15% chance can be a huge difference. Like when you need that stress resist, like it comes in seriously clutch. So I think it's definitely not her better one, but I don't think it's terrible. I think you can definitely play with this if you have a team that's really well built for it. But other than that, it can be a little rough for sure. So I would definitely say that this is it's C tier. People can use it. I use it. It's not like that terrible, but it's definitely a little situational at best. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Grave Robbers. So these are some skills that had a lot of rework done to them because these paths have always been a little bit iffy. I think these paths suffer not from being bad paths themselves, but from the fact that in the current state of the game, the Grave Robber is definitely not the best hero right now. So her first one is Deadeye. This increases her range skills damage, it lowers her melee skill damage, it increases her range skill crit, and it lowers her move resist. This one is pretty basic. The idea is that you're using her for range damage. You're going to generally keep her in the back rows. You can probably use something, you can move her up a little bit if you need to, but you're going to keep her in the back rows. You're not going to be using her melee skill like Pick to the Face or Lunge or anything like that. And you're also losing her ability to not be moved, right? And the reason that's kind of a detriment is like she's normally a dancer, like she's normally meant to move back and forth, but when you're restricting her to only her ranged abilities, you definitely don't want her getting pulled forward too much. I would say that the move resist is not that big a deal. Generally speaking, there's pretty easy ways to counter that, whether that's through trinkets or through other heroes, right? If you have a Jester or you have like, a Highwayman who can move himself, a Man-at-Arms who can move himself, if you get shuffled badly, even she has abilities like Shadow Fade that can move her back. Pirouette may not be the best ability for her in this situation, but hey, you can use it to move her back if that happens. You can kind of keep it as a reserve move because you're really restricted in what moves work for her here. So I would say it's okay. It's good. Like if you just want to do a little bit more damage of her, you really only want to use her ranged abilities, but it doesn't do anything super fun or fancy. It's kind of boring in my opinion. So I'm definitely going to let me make sure I'm using the right one. Yeah, I'm definitely going to give this, I think it's a C tier one. I think it's fine. It's not fun. It's very basic. It doesn't do anything, like 25% damage with her. She's already not dealing crazy amounts of damage. Most of her damage comes from like crit dealing, and the difference there is, yeah, she's going to be doing a bit more damage and it might allow you to kill more effectively, but you're reliant on the crit. If you're not critting with her, she's still doing pretty low damage. And again, I don't think that's the path as much as it is the character right now. So moving on to the next one is Night Sworn. So this is building onto her stealth mechanics, right? This one has gotten a lot better since stealth can now stack, whereas it didn't used to be able to, and it used to be such a pain to set up any stealth abilities. It was such a setup for so little reward, but now this one is definitely a little bit better. So you do lose 20% max HP. Excuse me, I just ate Indian food. she is one of the squishiest heroes already in the game. So 20% health reduction is, it's a lot. It's a lot of health reduction. So you definitely need to keep that in mind. She gets an additional 50% damage if she is stealthed. That's on all of her abilities. Now that's pretty good. You do have to keep in mind again that stealth takes some effort to set up, right? Either you have to have a trinket that does it, you have to use something like Shadow Fade, Dead of Night, or shimmering powders or something like that. You have to have a way to do that. Now she does have ways to set that up, and it does stack now, which makes it a lot better, but it still takes the setup. So that 50% damage is kind of like every other turn kind of deal. It's not really a consistent thing that you can rely on super effectively unless you have a way to start off stealth every time, something like Clandestine Cape or similar, right? You might have the books, the Time in the Desert. You can stack those kinds of things as best you can and try to increase the chances. Or you might even get something like is it Jealous Whisper? It's not Jealous Whisper. One of the cultist trinkets that actually generates stealth can make this much more effective. But again, very situational. Now, the real thing here is the lunge and pirouette skills. This makes her really good at her dancing effectiveness, and which is one of the best ways and most fun ways to play the Grave Robber. So just play her fluid, move her back and forth, lunge and pirouette, do some crazy cool damage if you can set things up right. So I definitely think this is one of her more fun paths. I think it's a lot better than it used to be. I don't think it's crazy powerful or anything like that, but I think if you play it right and you get the right trinkets and the right stealth setups, I think this one personally is pretty fun. So I'm definitely going to put it as B tier. I don't think it's like a really, really good one, but it's fun and I enjoy playing it. So the next one is Venom Drop. This one is definitely controversial. This one used to be so bad, right? So this is supposed to lean into her blight dealing. It's a little bit confusing. So her range skills lose base damage, right? She also loses base speed, so she gets pretty slow, right? -3 to her haste. Now she deals an additional 2 blight per tick, right? So all of her, if she's dealing 3 blight normally, she'll deal 5 blight normally if she's stealth. Now that's a pretty good one right there. Flashing Daggers, which is normally, it's an AoE hit that hits the 2 middle rows, normally just deals physical damage. Now it deals blight damage. When upgraded, it deals 4 blight damage. When regular, it's 2. And then movement skills, her movement skills, not somebody else's, her movement skills. So when she uses lunge or pirouette or shadow fade as well, give her a buff that increases her chance to deal blight. Now the real thing here is basically this makes flashing daggers very, very effective if you have a way to generate stealth. I would say this is probably her most fun path if you can make it work, but it's very difficult to set up. You have to have a reliable way to get stealth going. You have to deal with the damage reduction. So really all you're using is poison darts and flashing daggers. But if you get flashing daggers working, if you have upgraded flashing daggers and your stealth, that's dealing 6 blight to the 2 middle rows. That's an AoE 6 blight hit. That's pretty crazy. And of her increased crit chance, she has a pretty high crit chance from most characters, higher than most characters. That increases the chance that it's going to be dealing blight even longer. And then if you can get something like kitchen knives or curing cuppa, something along those lines, you can be dealing a lot of blight. So I definitely think this is a really fun path. Again, I think it takes a lot of setup. It can be an absolute pain. So I think it still needs some work, but I think, again, this falls more on the Grave Robber needing work, less than the paths. I enjoy this one. I've actually had a lot of fun with it. I would say it's better than Deadeye, just because it's more fun. It's more dynamic. It does what the paths are supposed to, which is to make you play the character in a way that you normally wouldn't, per se. And I think Deadeye just makes me play the Grave Robber normally. I just do a little bit more damage. So, all right, so next we're going to move on to the Highwayman. Now, here we go. Sharp Shot. Sharp Shot is his first one, and this is, without a doubt, currently in the game, S-Class. This is I would say, the best path that is in the game currently. It's the only way I really like to play the Highwayman. It makes him very, very powerful. So what it gives him additional damage to his range skills. It lowers the damage from melee skills. Not that big a deal. He has a very good abundance of both melee and range skills. So Pistol Shot, Grape Shot Blast, and Double Tap are all his range skills. Those do more damage. Double Tap already deals a lot of damage, so there's a lot of additional damage coming in here. He gets 3 additional haste, which makes him pretty much guaranteed to go first, depending if you have a Jester or Grave Robber in your team, especially if you combine him with something that increases his speed, which is really important. And his Grape Shot Blast skills, his AoE to the front 2 rows, gives him a strength token, right? So basically, the setup with this is you use something like Take Aim, which gives him, when upgraded, it gives him 2 crit tokens guaranteed, a dodge token, and a speed token. Combine it with the strength tokens you're generated from Great Shot Blast. He's doing insane damage. I mean, just really good and very reliable. You're not relying on percentages. With Take Aim, you're just knocking people out with crits. It's a very, very good path. It's just built very well for him, and I would say, in all honesty, while his other paths are actually pretty good, I almost never use them because Sharp Shot is so good. It just works too well for him almost, which definitely gives it the S rank that I think it definitely deserves. I think it's easily the most powerful path in the game, honestly. So, hey, that's just me. So moving on to this next one, we have Rogue. This one, if in rank 1, he deals additional damage. If in rank 3, he deals less than base damage. And if rank 4, he deals even less, so 25 and 50% respectively. If in rank 2, he deals base damage. And then Point Blank Shot gives him a riposte token, which of course it normally doesn't do. So generally speaking, this is built around the idea that you're going to use Point Blank Shot and then Duelist Advance forward and then Point Blank Shot back. And you're basically going to be riposting and dealing heavy damage to the front rows. It's a fun path. It's definitely very fun. Point Blank Shot is by far one of the most fun abilities in the game. When it hits, it feels really good. It kills pretty much anything that's like a regular tier, basic enemy. It just kills them if it hits them. I will say it's a bit more situational. It doesn't work all the time like Sharp Shot does, because there's a lot of enemies, especially cultists, and other enemies too, that start off with like dodge at the beginning. You can only hit rank 1 with Point Blank Shot. It does limit him, and you kind of have to, you end up not using it that much because you're almost always in rank 2. It's hard to set up Point Blank Shot to be, you can't just do it all the time. And if you kill the thing in the front row, then you're just hitting the corpse. So if he goes to the front row again, you're just going to Point Blank Shot to the corpse. It's a bit of a pain. It takes a little bit of a setup. It's a fun path. It's definitely not his best path. So I definitely think this one is, I would say it's A tier. It's very fun. It's very usable. It doesn't really hurt his other abilities as long as you keep him in the front 2 rows. It's just situational. So, and then the last one he has is Yellow Hand. This one is his more complex path. You kind of see this with a lot of the paths, is that the third path, the one they added after paths were introduced, is kind of more of like a complex, like, utility one. It's a little bit different. So apply on hit, his melee skills will reduce the bleed resist of the enemy that he hits. He gets an additional bit of health, so he's a bit tankier. His range skills are lower damage, and then highway robbery skills steal a positive token. Now you might say they already does that. It doesn't when it's not upgraded. So basically, when non-upgraded, it will steal 1 token. When upgraded, it will steal 3 tokens, because when upgraded, it steals 2. So you can get a lot of tokens from that. And then double cross skills also remove block. So if you hit double cross with somebody who has block, it actually pulls the block off and then applies the vulnerable token instead of them canceling each other out. So it makes it a bit more effective. So that way you're not just like hitting somebody with a block token, then it just kind of negating itself. It actually pulls it off. So pulls it if they have an additional block token, right? So really effective against like the soldiers in like the foot soldiers in Tangle, because he hits off the 1 block token and then it removes the other one and then applies the vulnerable. So pretty good there. This is built around making highway robbery a bit more utility, and also just trying to make him more of a bleed person, right? You're supposed to be using like Open Vein. You're supposed to use him in tandem with other bleed characters so they have a higher chance to deal bleed, his Jester or a Hellion, or even like a Surgeon Plague Doctor or something like that. It's okay. It's not really his best path. I almost never play it. I do like the highway robbery thing. I've had some fun with that, where it's like it steals right up the bat, so you can get some cool plays like that and stuff. But I compared to his other paths, it's pretty boring. So I definitely think this is a C tier. It's really not that great. It's okay. So now we're gonna move on to the mana arms. All right, moving on. Mana arms. So we have Vanguard, which this is his primary damage dealing path, right? This makes him more tanky. He can take more damage for additional 20%, which is no joke on the mana arms. His riposte skills, so when he uses riposte from setting up Retribution, deal an additional 50% damage. His crush skills deal an additional 25% damage, and he gets a pretty big debuff, which is that all of his dot resists go down by 20%. Makes him almost non-existent, so he basically cannot resist DOT. So I think the reason they did that was to make it so that it wasn't too much of a tank build. Like, he gets more health, but he can lose it a lot quicker, because you can just, if you use him as a tank with taunt, which you're gonna end up doing if you're trying to use the riposte skills, it ends up tanking a lot of damage down, because you know, he gets bleeds, he gets blights, he gets burns. It's hard to resist those things. You can use something like Physician Plague Doctor to help with that, but it's still never going to get like really high. It's only going to get base level. So definitely something to keep in mind. It's more of a damage dealing like skill set than it is supposed to be a tank. One, he's really not just eating that much damage because you do have to be a little bit careful, but it's still pretty good. And I would say overall it's like his most, it's basic, but it just works to his playstyle. The way that most people play the Man-at-Arms, this is definitely going to be the path that you use, because you know you can use Retribution, you can use Crush, you can use, you know, Courageous Abandon, you can deal those self heals, you can deal the riposts, and as long as you're healing him effectively, then he's good. So you don't really have to play him too strategically with Vanguard. I think it's a really good one. I'd definitely say that it's A class. It's not like crazy powerful, but you know, it's up there. It used to be it used to be S rank when before they nerfed it, and it was doing like plus 100% damage, which was crazy. So next one we have Sergeant. This is kind of an interesting one. So this is more of his support role one. So he loses 20% damage, so he's really not dealing that much damage with any of his abilities, but he does get 100% move resist. The next one's a little bit confusing because some people say, well, Bolster already removes weakness and vulnerable. What this does is it removes it on himself as well. So it basically self-applies and it applies to somebody else. And then each ally on turn start, there's a 20% chance that he will give them a buff that buffs them for 50% resist. So I would say this last point is kind of moot. It doesn't proc that often. It's a 1 in 5 chance for it to apply to one of your heroes, one of your allies, or to all of your allies, but it's 1 in 5 for each of them that it gives them this DOT resist. When it procs, it's great, but I'm generally really hesitant of liking things that like rely on procking. Like, I don't know, is it going to happen? So I kind of skip over that part. Really what this is supposed to be used for, in my opinion, is for like a back row Man-at-Arms that's doing all support, or a front row Man-at-Arms that you really want to just make into a tank using Defender and Retribution, right? You're not going to be dealing much damage with him, but he can tank a lot of damage, and he doesn't get moved, which is an important thing. It's really, really hard to move him because he does have this super move resist. So he's good against things like the Leviathan, especially because he can kind of, if he's going to be in the front row, he's not going to get pulled down by Undertow. I will say, do keep in mind that the heroes around him can get moved and force him to move, right? So he's not a mobile, but he is definitely very hard to move. I would say it's okay. It's a little bit boring. So I think this definitely goes in C class. It's okay, but it's really boring. I don't like playing it. And then comes Bulwark. I love Bulwark. I know a lot of people hate this or don't think it's that good, but basically it reduces the damage from Riposte and Crush, so his primary damage dealers go out the window, but his shield attacks, which is Rampart and Hold the Line, get plus 50% damage. Rampart can do some really big damage, some really big hits when it's upgraded, and if you get a damage trinket or you get a really good quirk, he's doing some good damage. His shield attack skills also get an additional 10% daze stun chance. Stun chance, if you didn't know, also rolls for daze, or daze rolls for stun resist. So, which is good because Rampart and Hold the Line both can stun when upgraded. They both daze. Actually, I don't think Hold the Line dazes. I think it just stuns when upgraded. I may be wrong on that one. I don't use it very often. And then Stand Fast, which normally just generates block tokens, also gives him 2 taunt tokens. I think that this is his best tank path because you can use Stand Fast and you can use Riposte to basically continuously generate taunt, whereas normally there's a cooldown on Retribution. Sorry, not Riposte, on Retribution. So you can basically almost always have some taunt tokens on him. Stand Fast just generates block tokens, so it gives him the 2 at the beginning, and then it generates more for the next couple turns and gives him block plus when it's upgraded, which is really powerful. And I find it's just he can actually deal a lot of damage with Rampart. You get a lot of stun potential out of it, get a lot of damage out of it, and you get I think is his best tank path. I personally enjoy this path the most out of all of his paths. I know a lot of people might hate me on that one. I definitely think it is an A tier path though, for sure. So sue me on that one if you will. I think it's really good. All right, so moving on to the Hellion. These are the ones I probably don't know the most because I don't like really any of them. But hey, whatever. We'll get to it. All right, Ravager. Additional 20% additional health. That's really cool. We like that. more health for her frontline. She of all the tanky frontline heroes, she is obviously the weakest. The man-at-arms and the leper being a bit chunkier than she is. If she's in rank 1, she gets an additional 25% damage. This is, of course, she's almost always in rank 1. There's very few times that you play her in rank 2, and the only time you do, you're usually just using toe-to-toe to move her forward to get rid of the winded token, so she's going to be in rank 1. Now, she does lose her bleed skill chance. I don't think that's really a big deal, because I think her bleed skills are kind of crappy, honestly. And the big thing here is that she has a chance to bleed herself. So obviously this can be helped if you have like adrenaline rush, if it gets pretty low on the health. It's only a 25% chance to proc the bleed resist, but it happens more often than you might think. Has a pretty good synergy with like the Runaway if she is cauterized, but of course that's a synergy. It's not based on, we're trying to base these on if they're alone. I think this is the most sensible path, honestly, but at the same time, it's still kind of like, nah, it's boring. So I think it's a B tier path. I think it works. I think it's B tier. B tier at the best. So next we have Berserker. So this one lowers her health, makes her much more squishy, increases her death blow resist, which is actually no joke, right? Plus 10% DBR is pretty good. Though with the changes to DBR recently where if she hits DBR, she then loses 10%. You're basically just getting one hit of DBR, one death store check like free of extra DBR, and then it goes away and she's back at her base. So that's good. You generally don't want heroes being at a death store more than once or any times in a fight, so having that one extra time where she's at like 90%, a really low chance for her to die, is pretty good. She does get the additional 33% chance to bleed. I don't really care for this. I think her bleed skills suffer from being very position dependent. You can only use one from position 1 or one from position 2 and 3. Who's using her in position 3? So you kind of have to switch them off. She's not very good at dancing for very obvious reasons. She can't move backwards. So you can only move her forwards, and then somebody else has to move her. And it's just like, it's very weird to me, her bleed skills. I don't really care for them. She also gets the additional crit from that. I really don't know who's using Berserker. If you're using a bleed build, then maybe. But like, I really don't think anybody's using. I don't think her bleed skills are that good. Somebody's going to get mad at me about this one, but... so now comes the real big controversy one, which is Carcass. So this is the one that is probably up there with like Monarch Leper as like one of the most confusing paths that they added. This is basically making the Hellion into a tank. So when she gets crit, she has a chance to lower her stress, either 1 pip or 2 pip. Or no, but generally 1 or 2 if she gets crit. So basically it negates the stress damage that you get from crits. She still has a chance to get it. She will generate it, but then sometimes she will, lower it, and sometimes she'll even lower it +1. So she actually can heal stress from getting crits, which is pretty interesting. Barbaric Yarp gives her taunt, so this is another way for her to generate taunt with toe-to-toe. You can use the two of them together to kind of continuously generate taunt, which is the whole point of this. Wicked Hack skills remove block tokens. That's a very situational ability. Somebody has to have a block token for you to even use it, and she's going to be dealing very, very little damage. So the only reason you would use this would be to remove the block token, which in my opinion makes very little sense in general anyway, because you're already hitting with Wicked Hack. Even if it does 0 damage, it's still going to remove a block token, so like, eh. And then she generates Winded, which lowers her speed, it lowers her damage. But the big thing there is that it will generate, or has a chance to generate, not guaranteed, but has a chance to generate a block token at the end of her turn for every Winded token that she has, right? So eventually she'll stack up to like 2 or 3 of them, and then you could get 3 block tokens from it, potentially, right? The idea here is that you're generating taunt, you're generating block, and you basically want her to tank. You want to use her support abilities, adrenaline rush, and then you're going to basically use adrenaline rush and Raucous Rebel to heal her back up, lower her stress, lower the team's stress, and then take more damage. It's not a very good path. It's very situational. I think it definitely has potential. I've definitely had runs that work with it really well, but it's very dependent on getting something like Stone Mount, which turns block tokens into block plus tokens, or just some other way for her to negate some damage. Like, it's very, very tough to make this path work. So I think it gets used more than Berserker in my opinion, but I don't think it's a good path. So that one's going to get me. I know some people are going to get mad about that one. All right, moving on. So we got Runaway. I'm trying to power through these now. We got 4 more heroes left. So Runaway, she has her first one is Survivors. This gives her healing skills plus 50% chance healing. Of course, this is both to her self-gen regeneration and to her cauterize. She has less chance to apply blight burn, and then she gets combat start. She gets 2 dodge tokens and a speed token. So this sets her up for round 2 as well. I think it's a very basic path. It just increases her healing, but the lowered burn chance is kind of annoying here. So you're supposed to be kind of using her as like a healer that deals a little bit of damage, maybe does some support things. So like using fire starter or control burn to like do some other things. I don't think it's that great. I don't think it's terrible, but I think it's pretty situational. I mean, the 50% healing given is nice, but her heal is very dependent on being bled, which bleed is very common, but if nobody's bleeding, you can't heal them. Even if they're on like 1 health, you can't do anything about it. So it's a very situational heal. And her regen heal only applies when it's upgraded. So for the first couple areas, you're probably not going to use it because you're probably not upgrading run and hide. And then that's really one of her least used abilities in general. So I don't think it's that great I don't think it's that great. I don't think it's terrible, but I definitely don't think it's great. I think it's a C tier for sure. Arsonist. So this one increases her blight skill chance and blight skill crit, so which is a lot of her abilities. It just helps her dealing damage. This is really good if she's frontline. It's really good if she's backline, especially powerful with something like Orphan, where you really want those burns to land. She does do less physical damage, but if you're really eggy, especially if like Orphan, you can't run this of Orphan. What am I talking about? Because it's a path. But she is dealing a lot of dots from burn in general, so you know, it's okay. The big thing here is that she has a chance to apply burn to herself, which is a problem because burn can't be healed that easily. So especially if she's like your primary healer, or if an occultist is your primary healer, you're kind of screwed there unless you have a plague doctor that can heal that burn off. It's a pretty common chance for this to happen, 25% chance to apply 3 burn to herself, and she's fairly squishy, so it's okay, but that's a really big negative. Like, it definitely gives her a lot more bonuses to her burn abilities and makes her a lot more potent, especially in somewhere like the Sprawl. But yeah, it's a rough one for sure. So I think it's B tier just because of the huge detriment to her abilities. Now, next we have my favorite path of hers, which is Orphan. So it does reduce her health. She's already squishy, which makes her pretty hard to play without having something that can tank the damage away from her. Basically, if she's in the front 2 ranks, she does way less burn, but she does more damage. The further forward she is, she does more physical damage. And if she's all the way in the back, she does way less physical damage, but does more burn. I don't really know of people who play this in the front. I think there's some merit maybe to it. If you can probably get her dealing a decent amount of damage with her just whacking abilities. But I really think where she shines is a rank 4 in the back, dealing plus 2 burn base, right? If you can get the right trinkets of this, if you can get her, even just her upgraded abilities, like Firefly is just dealing really good burn. Plus the fact that you can use Firestarter in combination with like somebody who has riposte, like the Man-at-Arms, to get a crit token, which gives you an even higher chance of applying those burns. I think it has a lot of merit. I think it's definitely one of the most fun paths in the game. It definitely does what I think paths are supposed to do, which is make you play a character in a way that you maybe normally wouldn't. I know it's supposed to be like you can play in the front or the back, but I don't know many people who play her in the front. So I think it's fun. I think it's a good one. I would still say it's B tier though. I don't think it's A tier. I think it can be, but it's if you get the right trinkets, it can do some crazy damage. But definitely think it's B tier for sure. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Jester. So with the Jester, we've got Virtuoso, Soloist, and Intermezzo. So Virtuoso is kind of his support role. Gives him a bit more health, gives him a bit more speed, allows him to set things up at the beginning. Does lower his DOT resist, so you kind of need somebody who can pull those damaging attacks away from him so it doesn't bleed and burn to death. And he gives an ally on turn start a chance to get 100% resist to stress. That may sound really low, but 100% chance has saved me from things like horror, from meltdowns quite a few times. It's actually pretty fun, and it's passive, though again it is situational. But I think the biggest things here are just his speed. It increases his speed naturally, which is really good. It makes him a bit tankier. It's a basic path. It's really good with something like an Encore build, or just anything where you want him to go early, like you want to get like, you know, quick chances to reduce stress at the beginning of your run, or you want to set up a battle ballad. It's definitely for his support abilities. I think it's okay. I think it's boring, but I think it's good. I don't think the downside is that great. So I would definitely rate this like B tier. Soloist is his damage dealing path, gives him additional 20% base damage, gives him additional 33% chance to bleed. His bleed causing skills do an additional 10% crits, but he does lose health and he does lose that speed. So this is really just about getting him dealing damage. I think this one is a lot of fun. It does make him pretty squishy, but he does deal a crap ton of damage, especially with his bleeding abilities. So I think this one, honestly, I use this one quite a lot. I would honestly call this one A tier. I think it's really good. I think it's very good. And so the next one we get to is Intermezzo. So Intermezzo is a very interesting one. All of his music skills apply bleed, right? So that includes Battle Ballad, Inspiring Tune, Play Out, Encore, any of those abilities, right? Pretty much all of his abilities, all of his support abilities, actually bleed your team, which you go like, well, that's crazy. It is kind of crazy, but he gets a lot of benefits from it. Inspiring Tune actually gives stress resist, a 20% base stress resist, so they're less likely to get stress again, which is really powerful. The real thing that comes from this, though, is the next two, which is Echoing March applies bleed to the target when they applies bleed, and then it actually applies because the songs, it counts as a song skill. So Solo and Echoing March are actually kind of attacks now. But Echoing March, it applies the bleed, and then every time that character moves, it rolls for another bleed chance. Combine that with the right enemies and you're getting stacks of bleed, right? Because it's not just when they move, which the ability of Echoing March forces them to move another couple times if they don't resist it, but you can use things like Demon's Pull, you can use Rampart, you can use the fact that some enemies always try to move themselves back or forward, depending on if you've moved them out of position. So it's particularly effective on back row enemies, like the Altar or Cherub, you pull them forward, and then other enemies, like the Evangelist, or like in the case of the Cherub, they all try to move themselves back. All of that counts as a movement ability. I've gotten this to stack up to like 12 to 16 bleed on an enemy in like one round, just because of like moving other people. You can move other enemies, like you can use Rampart on a position 2 hero and it'll push him to position 3, and the position 3 hero that had Echoing March or had this on it, yeah, Echoing March, then applies bleed to it again. So it can get pretty crazy. It does require a fair bit of setup, but it's definitely very fun. And again, I really like the fun ones. And then Battle Ballad gets the added benefit of just adding the chance to give you a positive token on top of the positive tokens that it already gives you. So it gives you crit, dodge plus, strength, or block. Pretty cool. It's definitely gives Battle Ballad a lot of utility. I think this one might be a bit controversial. I think it's A tier. I think it's one of the most fun abilities in the game. The fun pass in the game really just makes you play the Jester in kind of a weird way. I love it. So definitely a good one for me. All right, so moving on to the Leper. Let's talk about Tempest. Tempest is big chop. Do lots of damage. Additional 33% damage, additional 33% debuff resist, additional 100% disease resist, lowers his health a bit, and lowers his speed. We don't care about the speed. Nobody really cares about the speed on the Leper. So that's really a non-issue to me. The health is definitely a problem, but it's pretty easy to overcome, in all honesty. Plus 33% damage on him who's already doing a lot of damage. I think this is just a very good path. I think it's basic, it's easy, and sometimes that's what you want. Make sure I'm using the right one here. Yeah, sometimes that's just what you want. I think it's A tier. I think it's really fun. I think it's really good. Poet is kind of his tanking path. So this gives him additional 50% healing from his self heals. It gives him plus 50% stun resist, plus 50% move resist, and it lowers his damage. Basically, this makes him into like the wall, right? He just stands there, he eats damage, and then when you heal him using retribution, it just not retribution, sorry. When you heal him though using his self heal ability, I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now. He can do a shit ton of healing, like really just like heal himself fully. So he can eat loads of damage by using his taunt skills like Intimidate, and then just doesn't get moved, doesn't get stunned, stays at the front there, eats all the damage. I think it's really fun. Or I think it's really good. I don't think it's very fun. I think it's kind of boring. But hey, that is what it is. I think it's C tier. I think it's... no, I would say it's B tier. It's very usable, and it works in almost every situation if you're playing him as if you need a tank. It's his best tank path. But yeah. And so then we come to Monarch, which is one of the weirder paths in the game. I'd say up with Venom Drop on ones that just like confused people a lot. He lowers, so this is situational. For 90% of the game, he's going to have minus 30% max health. He's going to have his chop skills, which only counts for chop, not for hew, just chop, minus 75% damage. But he does get Purge and Intimidate skills, now add Vulnerable, which is pretty cool. So you can kind of use him as a tank a bit, but you still got to be careful about his health. But then if he's going against a Cosmic enemy, he gets plus 50% health, plus 2 speed, and plus 100% damage to chop skills. Now, do keep in mind, this is in combination with the other debuffs. So instead, he's not really getting plus 100% on chop, he's getting plus 25. It overcomes the minus 75 and then adds an additional 25%. So again, it's basically made to be a boss killer. He's supposed to be like the guy, you use this, you kind of like, it's called Monarch. It's kind of like, protect the king. You have to get him through all the rest of the areas and all the rest of the enemies and kind of deal with the handicap of him. And then you get to cosmic enemies like cultists and shamblers and end bosses, and you just chop them down super, super quick because he gets a lot of damage. I personally don't think it's good. I think you're already getting, you're getting less of a buff against cosmic enemies than you would with just using Tempest. You're only getting plus 25%. Tempest is giving you plus 33%. All the time on all enemies without having to like worry about health reduction or as big a health reduction and stuff like that. I don't think anybody's using it. Personally, I think this goes down here. Don't think it's that good of an ability. All right, so we're moving on to the Occultist. Okay, so here we have Warlock, which lowers his health, gives his range skills damage an additional 25%, and it gives him the chance to self-generate a 1 in 3 chance to self-generate an unchecked power token. I think it's a fine path. It basically means that you don't have to worry so much about using Chaotic Offering or having to line up hitting a combo token. You might get lucky and generate that second unchecked power, or even both of them unchecked power. His range skill is Demon's Pull and Abyssal Artillery. I call it Ceiling Spaghetti. Both deal pretty good damage, and plus 25% damage is good for them. Definitely helps for things like Falling Stars or the Flaming Meatball from space. Definitely gives them a lot more damage there, but that requires some setup. I would say it's a fine path, but it's kind of boring. Middle tier, it's okay, right? Next we have Ritualist, which gives him additional healing given, which we all know the Occultist healing is kind of wish-washy. This is basically makes it so when he does heal, he heals more. It makes his healing more reliable, so even if he rolls low, he's still going to give you a bit more healing. It does help out a lot with his healing. His cursing skills also have a plus 10% chance to apply their debuffs, so vulnerable and weakness are the big ones that he applies. This is actually really good because that's kind of one of his primary things, is making people weak and vulnerable so that your team can take them out very quickly or take damage less worried about taking damage. It also gives him self buffs, so it gives him the chance to give himself strength, give himself crit, or give himself dodge plus. Sorry for the food. The big thing here is he has a pretty high chance to start with a vulnerable token. Turn start, not combat start. So every turn he has a chance to roll for one. It does make him, it counts to the same as him losing a good chunk of health because he can take a lot more damage if you don't have a way to tank this. I would say this one is actually better. It's more fun than Warlock. It requires you to play with more of his like utility stuff and his cursing skills, which are pretty interesting. This does help with like Malediction, which counts as a curse skill. Malediction is that ability that nobody likes to use, but it can be pretty fun if you can get it to work on a big boss because it just starts stacking the DOT, but you have to get it to stick first. So I think it's okay. I would say it's probably B tier. It's not A tier. It's not C tier. So it's B tier. I don't know why I went on about that. Next we have Aspirant. Aspirant gives him additional health, gives his melee skills plus 25% damage. It gives Anamnesis plus 125% damage, which stacks with his melee skill damage because it also counts as a melee ability. It removes his debuff chance as being effective on cursing skills. He also has a higher debuff chance, I believe, to apply to him. Yeah, he has a lower debuff resist, but he does start with block token. This is basically like your frontline occultist. I think this is actually a really fun path. I think this is like a great way to make people play the occultist in the front rows, which a lot of newer players don't do because they see him as a support character, as a healer. He goes in the back, but like the same with Darkest Dungeon 1, playing him in the front, especially as Aspirant, you can get some really, really crazy damage with Binding Shadows or with not Wicked Slice. What's his whatever his regular Sacrificial Stab? That's what it's called. I think he's actually pretty fun. I think this is A tier. personally, because I actually have a lot of fun playing it, I think, again, it falls into the category of a path that just makes you play a character differently without causing too much like of a problem. So that's the last one. So here is my tier list. We only have one in S and only two that nobody uses. You know, I think they're all pretty good, and I think it just boils down to how you want to play. There's a lot of paths that I haven't given as much time to, but once I started to, like Intermezzo on the Jester, I was like, oh, that one's not very fun. And then I started playing with it. I freaking love Intermezzo. So I definitely recommend giving every path here a chance. I think some of them definitely need some work, but I really like the idea of them. It definitely makes you specialize characters a bit more. So, and yeah, on that note, definitely do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And yeah, thank you for watching the video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.